We'll do quick bios. I think you saw basically like what our little snippets are, but I'm Arielle. I'm interior designer at Gensler. I've been here for almost 7 years. And so I'll be taking you through the first part of the presentation about design, and then Chasen. I don't know if you want to say anything about yourself real fast.
I'm a architectural designer. I've been at Gensler for 7 years. And I'll be showing you what I do as an architectural designer at Gensler.
We got Liz.
Hey, I've been at Gensler for about 5.5 years now, and I'm a strategist in our consulting studio. So looking forward to telling you all about what that entails, since everybody usually says, what the heck is that? So
Awesome. All right. So I'll get going. So I feel like, I don't know if you guys ever heard of this, but most people always talk about being like left brain, right brain people. And I feel like I'm always trying to be like, I don't know what side of that I am really ever. I can't say that I'm anti-math, and I also can't say I'm anti-anything creativity basis. But in terms of like high school, though, I was strictly like a math and science girl. And I had like my little thing of like art. And I was like, well, probably going to go to school and just like become a doctor, right? Like, to my West Indian parents' delight. Like, they're like, yes, amazing. Like, do that. That sounds so great. Do all of that things. And when I was there, I was like, there's not enough. This ain't for me. This ain't for me. I need something that still has a side of creativity with it, but still maintains like my thirst for knowledge, and then also even more analytics basis. And so I was lucky enough to go to Cornell, where the interior design program is just that. It is a mix of environmental analysis and design all together, and it kind of marries both of those things into one. So with a value of understanding like human behavior in an environment and how an environment can change what that behavior is, and then also pairing that with just pure design and design history, design aesthetics, and all those things. And so after that, I knew that I needed to go to a place that, again, still worked in the same sort of way, a place that valued both sides of the spectrum. And Gensler was kind of just that. Here, I figured out from like my internship between undergrad and grad school, how the approach at Gensler was very much of understanding your client deeply, and then making really thoughtful design moves that help their business and also help the way that they work and would propel their business even further. So I'm going to take you through 4 different projects to show you kind of like the breadth of what being a designer is. It might touch on all the things you think a designer does, but maybe things you never thought of that we do. So first up is a project called Hudson River Trading. They are, I would consider them a high-tech company. So I do mostly tech interior projects. And so they're a high-tech company. Specifically what they do is like they're software engineers who developed an algorithm, to trade stocks the fastest. So like they just make boku money because they're like so smart that they developed an algorithm that people want to have so that they can trade their stocks. And what's really cool about them is that they're super they treat themselves as like a family, and they go on vacations together. They have like the holiday parties that have like Imagine Dragons coming and perform. And their office really is a place to cultivate that sort of like culture aspect. And so it's really critical for them to have like a kitchen where there's a chef that they have that cooks their meals every day. Nothing is frozen. They cook fresh meals all the time. They have a ping pong room, and they have like anything really amenities basis, you name it, they have it. So we built their space for them in 2018, I want to say. And then in 2019, they were like, oops, we're going out of that space. And this was in Fort World Trade Center. And so they needed to basically expand. But what had happened was that Spotify had expanded right above them. And so they had the next floor above and then higher. And then there was a tenant below them. And so with that, they couldn't expand into a floor that was connected to the floors they already had. So that was not going to work because they, of course, have to be together. So they came to us and said, all right, well, you designed our first office. We need a second one, but it needs to be super strategic in how you guys do it. So they were confident in us from the design standpoint because we did it already, but they wanted to make sure that we could plan for them for the future to not only place program in the right place so that they would still have their sense of connectivity, but then also be able to expand in their footprint day one versus day two. And so day one is like move in. When they moved in, they need to, of course, have enough space for people to sit. But then day two, meaning like in 5 years, once they grow, they wanted to make sure that they wouldn't outgrow their space again. So they took on more floors and we helped them understand not only where to put programs, so where to put their cafe, where to put their gym, but then also how to plan out the space so that they wouldn't be locked into one occupancy, like only 500 people day one, and then day two, you can't fit anybody else, right? So this was a really cool approach because we didn't, the design was of course important, but it was really about this like upfront understanding of how they grow and like where their program goes. That was super critical. And so we worked with like the studio that Liz works in to really fine tune all of that before we even got into design. For another project is IBM. So this is an IBM space that's not from one of the New York spaces that we do because the New York spaces are super confidential. But IBM is a client that we've had for a long time, and they are like global. So we do offices not only in the States, but then like across the world. And something that's super critical for them and any client that's this size is making sure that the offices speak to them and to their brand, no matter where you go, but that they also feel local to that place. So they came to us and said, all right, well, you've done a bunch of our designs for a bunch of our projects. Now, can you help us to develop a design guideline for other architects to use as well as yourselves? So like, can you help us develop this like booklet basically, right? So some of these clients have these booklets that tell you like how the space should feel, what their main goals are, what their main like drivers from like conceptual natures are, and then for you to put it into like kind of like a framework. So it's like, give the designer the runway to be able to actually design a space, but put like some like guard lines on it so that they don't go off to the moon when you're just asking them to go to the next exit, right? So, we did everything from trying to develop what like a typical palette should look like, and not necessarily saying use this specific finish or material, but it was like use these things in these proportions so that it speaks to their brand. And like, this is how you can use wood. This is how you use texture. This is how you use the color blue, because like IBM and blue go together, but they don't want blue to be something you walk on, but they also don't want blue across a whole wall because it should be something that you discover like you discover the brand of IBM. So this is super cool because I never, worked on a project that was like, help us develop what this guideline was going to be for our spaces. It's something we're used to like designing this space, not necessarily going back. But if our client gets that big and we work on enough projects, they do trust us to kind of help them make sense of what they want their brand and their aesthetics and their functions of the space to be. Another client is Etsy, and I worked on Etsy when I first started working at Gensler like full time. Like I say, like a real person. That's what I would say. You're always real, but but like when I first started officially, and so at that time I was like a staff designer on this project. I was like, this is super cool. Like I don't know why you guys are trusting me to be a part of this team, but like cool, let's figure it out. Fake it till you make it. But we've had them as a client for years now, and so. From what the first instance was with like doing this office in Brooklyn to now we are helping them with all their offices across the world. But then also our services have changed from just design, but to also help them understand their portfolio. So, they came to us about, I want to say 2019. I was like, okay, well, we have all these offices. Can you help us understand like who we have where, how many people exist, how many, like, should we take on new space in some of these locations? Should we move entirely? Like, what do we do? And can you help us figure it out? And so we had a session with them and their real estate brokers to really like analyze all of their properties, right? And say like, okay, well, maybe you can make a move in London, but maybe you're fine in Dublin. Maybe you do something that's like a renovation in place in San Francisco, and then Brooklyn, maybe you do something completely different. And like, that's a kind of cool thing because they trust us at this point. We're like partners for them. And so again, it's like, it's still design, but it kind of goes deeper at this level. But then also now that we're in COVID times, they came to us and was like, okay, well, how do we change what our place looks like for the future? Like, how do we work in a way that is going to be conducive to like a hybrid work environment? And so we had an ideation session with them a few months ago to help them kind of rethink what it means to be in an office, and in their office in particular, and why people are coming to the office in general. And then additionally, looking at their amenity spaces to try to like rethink what those also look like, because, you know, they've been in this space for like about 6 years now. And what we're trying to do is basically try to give like new life and new purpose to the spaces that they've been used to, and rework them to respond to what society is doing right now, what life is going to be like post-COVID, and why people are coming into the office. And so can we change what they typically would do from like a food standpoint that would match that? And so it's been really cool. It's been like a super interesting journey with Etsy, because to go from like I said, like a staff designer to be one of the lead designers, to help them kind of rethink what it means to be in their office, the office that they've been used to, and even like ways that they're working and how their space responds to them, has been really rewarding. And the last project that I'll touch on is for Campari. And so Campari is a spirits company. Their main headquarters is in Milan, but their North America headquarters was in San Francisco. And so they were making the move, it was super secret, making the move to New York. And so the space not only had to speak to them as a brand, like an old brand at that, but then also needed to tie to the moving to New York. So this was kind of like, it's our first foray with Campari. They're the new client. So we really had to like understand them and understand their business. And so to do that, the way that we designed for them was rooting our design and our concepts in cocktails. And like, because we had to speak their language, right? So we're like, okay, so then all the spaces that we design, we're going to have a tasting profile for each of them, and speak the language that like a bartender or a person who was like involved with spirits would speak. So all of our spaces were like aligned to this framework. So, you know, we would present to them the framework first before we designed anything. We said, okay, so we're going to have these tasting profiles, and all of the major spaces are going to have their own. And we're going to just buy into what this concept is before we design it. So this framework ended up being kind of like our cheat sheet for them. So they would check it too. So if we presented a design to them and they were like, oh, well, this does not match the tasting profile, so y'all need to go back and try again, because you're saying one thing here, but what we're seeing is not quite that. And so it was super great because, you know, the design ended up being so tied to what this concept we kind of curated together with them, and it made for so much of a more thoughtful space after. So for instance, like the elevator lobby that you see here, you know, it was something that we said we wanted to have it be branded. It had to be blue because that was, or cobalt, I should say, not just blue, right? Cobalt. Because Campari Group, that's their color, that's their branded logo. But it also had to feel like it was in Milan, but still tied to New York, because you're in New York anyway, even though it's a Milan brand. So we had like, you know, these like suede walls and like gold and brass finishes, but it really started to tie. And so we saw that like all these tasting profiles we developed really did translate into this space. So the staircase, like that was supposed to be like you're feeling like you're in like a Campari bottle, which is like red, right? Liquid is like super red. And so we covered almost all the surfaces in red in that place. It's like you're going into a discotheque. Mind you, it's just a staircase, but it is the coolest staircase because they're taking people through this that they're trying to either like have their brands be sold in their bar or something like that. Like it's kind of a lot of schmoozing that has to get done. And so with that, the space really needs to tie to that. And so we had to always think of like, think luxe, but think function, think, sales, but then also think like workplace. And so we have a secret bar that's also there. And that is like, what we call the Boulevardier bar. And so we had a chandelier that we salvaged from like Italy. There's like this old bar from like the 1920s from Chicago. All of it kind of comes together. All these elements were thought of to make sure that the space like sang for them. And their workplace, of course, had to be something that was functional. They wanted to be clean, but of course, it still had to have like the little nods to the brand as well. So we were going to do just like a typical chair, but they were like, no, like add in a red one. So we have red chairs, but everything else really is neutral. And we let the other spaces that were more front forward facing be the ones that were like the bigger punch of design, so to speak. So that's my time. And I'm going to transfer it over to Chasen, who's going to take it with you guys next.
Sure. It's pretty funny. I used to sit next to Arielle, and we used to work together on Etsy, actually. And I went on a completely different path. So it's cool to see what she's doing now. Hold on a second. So. My job, you guys can see my screen, right? Okay, cool. As an architectural designer, I think of myself as almost like a storyteller. What we do is, sorry. Okay. We have this large concept, and we brainstorm ideas, and what I do personally is put ideas into a model. I thought about like what I do day to day. It's really about using these different tools to sell a vision or sell a story. This is a project in Long Island City where we wanted to bring back to the community. We thought that there needed to be some sort of magnet in this building that draws people into it, which was in the form of a stair and a ramp. And then what we do is model it and create visualizations that to sell that idea to a client. This was a project that would bring in different tenants into the building, but create like a food hall concept of more for community based. And what I do is create these visualizations using these programs that I've learned through time. To create diagrams here or plans and sections that show the stack of the building and the different program elements that are brought in. To me as a designer, I love to draw, and I was thinking about, where I was in high school, I guess 15 years ago, and I love to draw. I mean, that was my thing. I also love to take pictures, and I was teaching myself Photoshop. I use this program called Bryce 3D. I don't even think it exists anymore, but it's really just about, what were the tools that I was using as a kid growing up and how that sort of helped me into where I became now. And, you go to college, you're going to learn all these different programs. We back in the day, we thought AutoCAD was the future. It turned out to be Revit. And I personally learned V-Ray and different programs. I'm learning Enscape now, and these different programs that keep getting developed, and you kind of have to learn them to everyone has their own set of tools that they use. And I have my own set of tools, but at the end of the day, it's really about creating these visualizations that get people excited about these projects. I still personally love to draw my ideas out on a piece of paper, just a pen, and get all my ideas out onto that piece of paper. It's really a way for me to almost like escape the real world and get those ideas down before I can put it into a model. This project is an educational project in Pittsburgh. It was all about this stair and placing these programs along the stair to create the sense of community up through the space. And you start off by creating diagrams and visualizations, and then soon those become into more technical drawings, more hardline drawings that are explained through a real set of plans that people can build off of, or sections. And but again, we're trying to make that vision clear to people about the stair and really selling that idea. And again, showing the renderings. These are done through 3ds Max. It's a rendering program that we have to show that and visualize it to the client. This is another project in Philadelphia. It's a mixed use development next to a existing old power plant. It's abandoned, and if you go to the site now, it's a completely abandoned site. But so you have to create these visuals that really get people excited, showing, some of the stuff is make believe, right? But like, adding balloons to make it a little more fun, getting the water into the image with a boat, showing excitement, showing activity on the promenade to show a vision for the client, because they're going to end up putting a lot of money into to get this built. So they want to get, you want to show them something that they want. So this was an abandoned power plant station. It was all about creating the spine through the building. There was no clear circulation through the building, so we wanted to create a spine through it, and then showing how it could connect to different programs in the building through that spine. And again, drawing out my ideas on a piece of paper before we throw it into a visual model. This is another project in Tennessee. It's in Knoxville. It was all about this central courtyard and placing these blocks of program of different apartment buildings and condos around this central square. And what we also use at Gensler are just different tools. Like, you're going to learn all these different things. These are to show sun diagrams and showing how much sunlight actually gets into this courtyard, which would be really important. If you're telling them it's all about this courtyard and you don't have any sun in it, then they're not going to do that, right? So you want to prove to them that there's sunlight even during the winter times where the sun is lower. You can get sunlight into that square, and obviously during the summer you'll get more sun. And also another thing that we do is print these little 3D models. We have a model shop, and just little study diagrams or little models that we move around. They take about a day to print out, so we just test ideas. These were a little smaller, but you can definitely do like larger scale models. This is actually a project that Arielle, I think, worked on. It's just a larger model that is presentable, where clients can walk around. They can actually pick up things, move things around. But yeah, again, at Gensler, we have a model shop with 3D printers, laser cutters, and things like that we build these things out. But I think a lot of these projects that I've been showing are just showing you the final product. I think what's really important in architecture is just the design process. This is one project that we've been working on during this pandemic, actually, and it's just evolved into, it started off from here, it's evolved into different design options, and you put in the time because these buildings are going to be there for a while, so you want to make sure you get it right. It just evolves from one idea to the next, and to see it evolve is kind of cool to me. But using all those tools that are given to you, whether it's just drawing, for me, I actually got an iPad to learn how to draw on these iPads. It's really just familiarizing yourself with what is out there, learning different technology that is able to sell that idea. And, because of work from home right now, really just being able to draw quickly, send to a team member, see what they think about that. It's just a quicker way to get things done now. And, we just have a lot of good resources at Gensler. Actually, we have a digital design team that actually plays around with different technologies and see if there are things that Gensler should look into and develop or work with. We also have a sustainability team that shows that they create these diagrams that proof out why we should be doing things on a sustainability standpoint. For this, in the office building, how much light you're getting into the office building, where you can place your core of the building for vertical transportation and things like that. So it's really cool to work with different people who went on different paths at Gensler, and just proofing out your building to make sure it's efficient and it works. So yeah, just a lot of different design direction. Ideas, development. We've studied this building so many different ways, and it could be a project that just you're creating these different diagrams to sell the concept to get it built, and then the development of the project could make a project that looks like this and turn it into this, and then eventually will look like this. So it's just cool to see that development and the reason why you're doing all these things. This is a project in Philadelphia, and the reason why you do all these design iterations is really, again, like, this building is going to be built and people are going to work in it. People are going to live in it, and it's going to be there for a while. So you want to make sure, it looks good, it works, and it's really just building a machine that people inhabit themselves in, so this is a project in Philadelphia along the water. And one thing for me, a lot of the projects that I've shown you are kind of in the works. Some of them are getting built and some of them are not. But this project happened to we made all the drawings. You give it to a contractor, they figure out how to get it built, and then eventually it's going to these things get put together. You go out there, and these projects take a long time. I mean, this is a project that's been going up for 2 years, and it's something really valuable to see it when it gets built. This happens to be across from the train station in Philadelphia, so I think that's like one of the most powerful things. Whenever I get to go to Philadelphia and I come out of the train station, I get to see a project that I built or designed, and it's pretty powerful. So I just wanted to, I think that's it. Oh, that is it. That's what I have. Yeah. So Liz, you can go.
Awesome. I'll wait to share my screen. There we go. All right, let's see. Okay, are you able to see? Okay, the right thing? Great. Okay, so like I said before, I'm Liz. I am a strategist in our consulting studio. But before diving into what I do as a strategist, I just want to give you all a little background on how I got here. Growing up, I always loved art. I was really creative. I took a lot of art classes across many different mediums like painting and metalwork and graphic design. And, I did creative extracurriculars, but despite being so passionate about art, honestly, I was afraid to pursue a career in it because I didn't want to become a starving artist. So I was also, I really enjoyed problem solving, and I was really good at math at the time, but, all of which has completely gone from my memory. But regardless, at the time, I was like, okay, art plus math equals architecture. So I went to Virginia Tech for architecture. And about a year and a half in the program. And after talking to architects to understand, what it is they really do on a daily basis, I realized that I did not want to do architecture. And so, cue a ton of anxiety about what I should do with my life and a bunch of depression from feeling completely lost and stuck in a field that I didn't know anything about. So, after a grueling search for what I should study instead, I switched my major to interior design and picked up minors in both industrial design and also in communication. And communication covers things like sociology, theories of human behavior, psychology, influence, rhetoric, research methods. And so, I loved different things about all the fields of study I switched into. So, it was worth it. And my senior year, I ended up talking to a strategist at the Gensler Chicago office. And that's when I learned that design strategy was even a thing. And as he told me about all the different things he does, I was like, you mean to tell me that there's a whole job that has all the things I like about design and none of the things I don't? And yes, there is. So what is design strategy? I'll get into the details in a little bit, but just generally, design strategy, you can think of it as a mix of corporate strategy and design thinking. So when I say corporate strategy, I'm talking about it's, how businesses identify, plan, and achieve their goals and objectives. And then design thinking, a methodology that involves engaging end users in an iterative design process in order to come up with a creative solution. So figuring out that I was interested in design strategy led me to the consulting studio at Gensler. So consulting, what is it? Our studio, we're an amalgamation of strategic thinkers, and we work super collaboratively, both internally with designers and other strategists, and also externally with our clients. And, we're super client facing, and it feels a lot more honestly like co-creation rather than providing them a service. And I think that that's something that's, a common theme at Gensler as well, almost like we're on the same team. And so you get to learn a lot about different companies across many industries, which is super cool. Like I was working directly with clients from the start, legit, like 2 weeks after I was hired, I was like facilitating workshops with leaders from BCG. So that's another thing I really love about it is there's so many different people that you get to work with. But yeah, so the people in consulting, we have a variety of backgrounds, both design related and not, which means that there's a broad range of services that we provide. And so I won't run through all of these just for the sake of time, but some of the things we do include, over on this side, there's pre-design and programming, which involves a lot of number crunching in Excel to figure out how much you can fit on a floor or in a building, things like setting ratios for seats per person, ratios of collaboration space to individual space, and more things like that. And then, up here, let's say there's sustainability, right? And sustainability consulting involves helping companies and communities become more resourceful, resilient, regenerative through developing sustainability strategies, running analytics like some of the ones that Chasen showed, and working with designers to help clients achieve their sustainability certifications. And since personally, I'm more of a qualitative thinker, the services that I focus on are workplace strategy, change management, and innovation consulting. So let's dive into what I actually do on a daily basis. First, I'll start with workplace strategy. And what that is, it happens before design starts. And it's all about defining the vision and the strategic direction for a workplace. It involves things like running vision sessions to help clients figure out, the principles that should drive the design decisions, user research, like doing interviews and focus groups to understand how different groups of people at a company work, figuring out what's working, what's not, and communicating that to leadership and other decision makers. And so when we use, we take all of the things that we found and we use those research findings and the client's vision to create concepts for design. Things like, the general direction for look and feel, what kinds of spaces should there be, what kinds of technology and tools to leverage, and different ways to improve their employees' workplace experience. And, this process is super collaborative with designers, which is awesome. And like literally the tasks that I do when I'm doing workplace strategy are things like creating questions and discussion frameworks for user research, interviewing people, running focus groups, running vision sessions, synthesizing all the information I collect to create findings and insights, designing these kinds of diagrams and pages to communicate concepts, and lots of client meetings to refine the strategy. Another service that I do is change management. And broadly, change management involves communicating with end users in a way that helps them adapt to change effectively. So, like if a client currently has a workplace where everyone has a private office and their new workplace is going to be an activity-based workplace where there's an open plan and everybody has an assigned desks, that's a huge change in the way that people work. And generally, people don't really like change. And so it's definitely going to be a struggle if you just plop them in the new workplace and say, good luck. So to minimize the effects and maximize the positive effects, you've got to bring people along and you have to prepare them for working differently, both before they move into the new office and after. So when I do change management, I develop a plan for how and when to communicate with employees. And it involves breaking down information into digestible pieces and sharing it in engaging ways. So in this example specifically, the very first touch point would be communicating to employees what that vision and strategy is for their new workplace, communicating the why behind the change. And then maybe a month or so later, we'll engage with employees again to share information about the new design and ways to use the space. And we'll show things like rendering in the new space, the floor plan, etc. And then after that, we will show info on how to prep for the move, what kinds of new technology, how to use it, any new services, what the new workplace norms might be. And then after move-in, we engage with employees to help them adapt and really live out those new ways of working that the strategy and the design are meant to support. And then lastly, we'll do a post-occupancy evaluation like 3 to 6 months after they move in and do things like interviews, focus groups, surveys to gauge if the new workplace is working well, find areas that need improvement and things like that. And so the thing about change management is sharing information with employees can be as boring or as fun and engaging as you want it to be. You could share information about the new design by making a presentation and then having the real estate person present it at an all staff meeting. But that's boring. That's not engaging. It'll probably result in, them not really retaining the information and also generally a less positive perception of the change in general because it's like they're doing this thing to me. So instead of a boring presentation, you could plan, let's say, a Meet the Designer event where there's food, there's drinks, there's a bunch of posters that show renderings and different stations that show information on different aspects of the design. And then the real estate people can be there and designers are there. And the designers have laid out all the different finishes that they're specifying. And employees can talk to the designers about the concepts. And maybe there's also a station with samples of different chairs that the designers are deciding between. And employees can test them out and maybe vote on which ones they like the best. And maybe there's a VR station where they can walk around in the new space. Same information being shared, but it's a much better experience. And employees will be so much more receptive to changes in their workplace, not only because the format in which it was delivered was better, but also they'll feel like it's kind of like a two-way street. They're part of the process. So the last service I'll talk to you about is innovation consulting. And this is what I personally love the most, and it's what I do the most often. And it's also something that my team and I have been developing as a new service offering over the last 3 years or so. And so just to oversimplify a little, innovation consulting is all about helping companies work more innovatively. So, this can mean a lot of different things, but the two kinds of innovation consulting projects I'll share with you are a type of project that's innovation capability building, and then also culture strategy projects. So looking at capability building, with this client, they wanted to be more innovative and deliver new products and services that would disrupt, the markets that they're in. And they realized that working the same way that they always do would not lead to more innovative outcomes. And so they hired us to work together with them to create a new operating model specifically for innovation. And so we worked super closely with them and developed this new methodology called the Innovation Factory. And it involved developing a new work process that is based on the design thinking method. And it includes things like creating new roles for people, holding these interactive boot camps to onboard people onto an innovation project, user research methods, brainstorming methods that are totally different than how they work today. Processes for prototyping and testing solutions, new storytelling methods for sharing their concepts with leadership so they'll prove new ideas and, not fall back into traditional thinking, which limits innovation. And we also did things like run hackathons for their people, so they could come up with new ideas, and we could kind of guide that groundbreaking thinking. And so we were able to create all the tools and the templates that they would need in order to build their own capability to be innovative on their own. And so I did a lot of different things with this project, but some of the specific things I did included, creating infographics that translate super complex businessy concepts into something that anybody could understand, facilitating innovation sessions and lots of collaborative work sessions with the client to co-develop what this new way of working would be. And then lastly, there is culture strategy. This is my passion. I absolutely love it. Basically, culture strategy is all about helping companies improve their culture. It involves understanding what their current culture is, the good and the bad parts, what culture they want, and then figuring out ways that they can achieve the culture that they envision. So on some projects, I do a lot of user research to understand what the current pain points are. So that means talking to a lot of different people and having them open up and tell me what really goes on at work. Things like, our company says it has a no jerk policy, and yet all of these super mean and emotionally abusive leaders are the ones getting promoted. Or we do all the work, but our manager presents it like it's their own and we get no recognition for it. So then we take all this information, we synthesize it, and we share it back with leadership. And it can definitely be a hard pill for them to swallow, but then we get to create some really awesome solutions for ways to activate the culture that they want, like creating new ways for managers to reward and recognize their team and making sure they do it often, or leadership training series where we develop all kinds of activities to help them develop skills to be better at working with and supporting their people. So what's fun is that every company's culture is different. The insights and the culture activations that we develop are always different. Like recently, we did a project to help a company build their virtual culture and community, and that's totally different than another project where we helped leadership of a new business unit develop what their culture principles will be. But the one thing that always remains consistent is, we believe in empowering the people and humanizing work. We basically strive to make work not suck and create an environment where people are engaged and love their jobs. So you may have noticed that, some projects I do are really close to the built environment, and some actually don't have very much to do with the built environment, but rather they're focused on designing how people work and interact from a behavioral perspective. So while all these different projects I have talked about might seem like different things, they all have one thing in common, which is using strategic thinking for transformation and human behavior. So that's all I have for you. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. Could I ask the students to begin putting their questions or raising your hands to ask questions? I'll start off with the first question. What has been for each one of you, most challenging part of your job?
That's so interesting. I don't know. Jason, you want to go first?
I think the challenge is really just having to, adapt. Things happen every day that you just don't really know. A client might call you and tell you they don't like something or they want something changed and they need it immediately. Sometimes it's you have a deadline and someone gets sick, or you just have to be able to adapt sometimes to get things done. I think that's kind of the challenge, maybe.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely a mix of just being able to be nimble can be challenging, especially if you think something is going to be a certain outcome or not. But another thing too is just is the amount of clients that we have. They differ, even if it's something that, like, if it's one financial client does not look like the next financial client. And so it's sometimes it can be challenging just to make sure you're like deeply in the mindset of this next one. So if you have like multiple clients, it is trying to make sure that you are in the zone and in the headspace for this particular one in this particular moment. But then also that goes back to just being nimble. So I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it's just like a skill that you super have to kind of like build.
Right.
Yeah, I think one thing that came to mind about, what's challenging is that, clients come to us to be partners with them, and they want us to lead them in new directions and, improve the things that they're looking to improve. And it's super easy for sometimes to kind of fall back into, well, this is the way it's always done, or, this is the safe bet, or this is the cheapest bet. And we really do have to step into our role as, being a thought leader and pushing them and encouraging them to go to new places. And that can definitely be hard, because if you're in a room with a bunch of people that are like, no, this will never work, like you do have to like stand up for it and encourage them and make sure that they like realize what the potential can be. And in the end, they're always so happy that we do that, but it's really hard in the moment. And I think that's a pretty challenging thing, in addition to all the things that Arielle and Chasen said.
Thank you. Yufeng had a question.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'd like to ask, what is like the most important mindset you have in Gensler?
I would say collaborative, and that's going to sound so cliche, but honestly, like collaboration, and we mean like across hierarchies, across groups, with people that have totally different points of view, like that is critical. And I think partnering with this collaborative mindset is also kind of this air of humility, because if you are going to learn from others and take the best things from your team and really leverage everybody's strengths, you've got to like want to do that, and you've got to like know that it's like you might bring one thing to the table and somebody else is going to bring like something different to the table. And I think that is exactly what makes Gensler kind of what it is because that's something we really value, and that's something that a lot of people really live out.
Yeah, and also I would say, collaboration, that's huge. It's super huge. And another thing in tandem with it is because the organization is so big, I feel like people sometimes shy away from it because it's like I might get swallowed up. But there is a saying about like the entrepreneurial mindset, but it is really true. It's being able to, like, everyone has something to bring to the table, and understanding that like your voice matters, and like all of it matters. And so if there's something that you're seeing, you're like, oh, that can be better, suggest it, like do it, right? That's something that I think that we find is super valuable for our firm, when someone like raises their hand and kind of is like willing to step up to the plate and like solve a thing or bring something up to be looked at. That's also been something that I think is super rewarding. And like on like my side gig with Gensler that I do, it's like it is trying to see like how we can push ourselves forward into the future and like innovate. And so I do think the raising your hand and like offering something is also super important.
Yeah, building off of that, I think that just like a diversity of mind, of a mindset, diversity of like thought is really apparent in the work environment. Just, whether you're collaborating with a GC or a mechanical engineer trying to get things done, everyone has a different way of thinking. It's not that someone's better than someone else. It's really just trying to utilize just different ideas that get thrown onto the table. Like Liz does completely different thing than I do, so, and she comes from a she comes to the project with a totally different angle than I would. But there's a question here about like being too creative. I mean, we have the three of us are definitely more on the creative side, where we try to push the boundaries of what can be done. And we definitely have, and I mean, we have a whole technical team at Gensler that kind of brings us back to reality. But we also try to challenge them on trying to make something that's a little different and more unique, rather than kind of a cut and paste type of thing that happens. So I mean, we have a whole technical team that has restrictions on what we can do, and we try to make it a little different. So
thank you. I know Kevin Garcia had a question, so Kevin, you can read out your question out loud.
Yeah. My question is, how is the relationship working with companies like Turner, JB&B, GMS, and Ceremony?
yeah, so I mean, we work with a bunch of different consultants and different GCs. So I mean, Turner is one that we've worked with. JB&B, mechanical engineer. GMS is a structural engineer. We work with a bunch of different consultants, and it's again, right, like they're going to throw a structural engineer. Sometimes they just say you can't do that. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, and we will challenge them to get it to something that's cool. I mean, they also want to see something that's cool and unique, and so they challenge themselves. They'll challenge us on to make things. People have to breathe in the building, and the building has to stand up. So we have to accommodate for that.
Yeah.
But we have relationships with all these different other companies, and along with different clients and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. I believe Ian has a question.
Hi, yes. I would just like to ask, like, do you have any tips when it comes to presenting in virtual reality?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because I guess I can see from like the tech standpoint, a lot of times you don't have clients that are in the same room as us because they can be like global, they just maybe not live there. So one thing I think is key is making sure to pause in some moments, right? Like I feel like when you're in a space with someone else, you understand the natural moments where to take a beat and to like ask the questions and make sure everyone's understanding. And I do think that in virtual reality, it's important to do that. It's like anything to engage through the screen is important. And so if you're taking questions or having it be like interactive in any moment, this is the time to do it. And so I would say that. I don't know if Liz or Chasen, you've experienced anything with conducting some of your meetings or sessions that you can also offer.
Some clients just love putting on those goggles and getting into a world and looking around the building. It's kind of funny because I was actually just thinking about that the other day with this whole COVID thing. You can't just send people goggles. So, but I mean, before this, they definitely love to come in the office, put the goggles on and look around. We still have different programs and different technologies that can do that through remote. It's obviously just on the screen, and you can look around the building. And speaking of that, actually, just kind of random, but I was actually talking to my friend the other day, and he actually does like video games, and he designs buildings that are in the background of all the video games. I mean, that's it's in itself building to the virtual world. Like these are obviously all kind of fake buildings in the game, but you can get into that whole entire world of architecture if that's something that you want to do.
Okay, thank you. Lane's had a question as well.
Hi. I hope everyone could see me well. I hope my voice is coming through well. So the question that I had was, sorry, just what tips would you recommend for someone who wants to enter into Genko, or at least enter into your fields of work?
Well, I would say
Interesting one.
be really curious. Don't limit yourself, because I feel like, and I mean, this is just speaking from my own experience, and everybody has a different one, but like, if I would have come in with this defined vision of I'm going to be an interior designer that, works on these kinds of projects, I never would have opened myself up to things that I didn't know existed, and find the things that I really love. And I feel like that's similar, regardless of kind of what role you're in, whether it's like thinking that, you're only going to work on a certain type of client project, or like do only a certain part of the design process, or whatever it is, like being curious and trying different things, and like finding what it is that that really speaks to you and what you love. I think that's super important, because if you do that, chances are you're going to then be given that kind of responsibility and role and grow that skill set as you keep going. And then you're going to love your job. So instead of just kind of molding to what other people say that you should be, following the thing that you really love, it might be hard in the short term. Like, you got to fight for the things that you want to pursue, but it'll totally pay off in the long run. Talk to a ton of people, share your interests, learn about what other people do, try things. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I guess the other thing is, like, it's just me personally, I'm a very visual person. So I think I was lucky that I was, messing around with these programs at a younger age, getting used to the tools. Because even if you don't end up using that specific tool, just familiarizing yourself with how these tools work, and they have all different interfaces. You're going to learn a new tool. There are a bunch of different programs that are getting thrown at us that we have to keep learning, but it's really being able to adapt to those, because at the end of the day, you have to still get something onto a page, and it has to look good. So I think fine-tuning that craft is really important.
Yeah, I second all of it.
All right, thank you very much.
Of course.
Thanks.
Next, Janet Martinez asked a question.
Hi, Lance actually asked a similar question to mine, but I have another question. So, what advice or helpful tips would you give to students who want to major in interior design?
Oh, I guess I will take that one. That's so interesting, because, like I said, I'd fallen into it. But what I would say, what I know now, I would say it's really good to learn as much as you can about the industry, even from like the outside. So like the trade magazines, or like following different designers, starting to develop what's your point of view? What do you have to bring? How do you approach interiors differently? I think is something that's super important. And it's not something that you're going to perfect and get right from the jump, but starting to build it, because I think that like any designer, architect, or strategist, or anybody, you start to, as you work, as you learn, as you're in the field, you start to build like what it is your voice is as you go. And I think just being familiar with what's out there is also super helpful. And of course, too, like Chasen was saying, familiarizing yourself with the programs is great. Like if you can get any free trials, get any of them. Like get the free trial for Enscape, your students, so you can do that. Like build out those skill sets as well. Definitely you build up your skill set in terms of like drawing or anything like that. And even just like reading books, reading the books that kind of talk about design, talk about just like the pure practice of design, not even like before you even draw the walls, like what it even means, and kind of delving into it from that standpoint, just to give you kind of the background. You'll learn all of it in school, of course, but it's good to have like that extra sort of foundation, in my opinion. It only prepares you even more.
Okay, thank you.
Got it.
Next is Gilbert Bueno.
Hi. So I was wondering, since each of your jobs has such a big creative aspect, has there ever been a point in time where like creativity gets to be too much or like you have too much on your plate, and how do you handle that?
Too much creativity? I think that's a good thing.
I'm sorry. I meant more of like, if you have too much to do, how do you like delegate that to other team members?
I mean, I think as you keep working, you find ways to be very efficient in how you're working. And I think a lot of that, actually, to go back, I mean, I keep talking about these tools and these programs. Back in the day when I was starting, which was not that long ago, it's only like 10 years ago, it took a long time to get to render out these views, to create a rendering. And now it's pretty quick. Like these with Enscape, these renderings can happen. You can pump these things out pretty quickly and see different design options. But there's still just a need to know how to be efficient with the technology and knowing how to be efficient with designing. And I mean, that just comes with experience, to be honest. You just know what works and what doesn't work. But also at the same time, always wanting to think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that too, I mean, personally, and I think that all of us probably say it, like if there are people who are like managing the projects, like we're not the like project managers for all these things, or design managers, so to speak. And so I found that like if you just ask for help, like if you think you're going to need the help, you just ask for the help. Like it's totally okay. And I think that's also important to know, that it's not like everything is like one person on a ship. Like there was a team of people that are doing all this stuff to make it all manageable. And so like everyone has their aces and spaces. And so we kind of work that way. So yeah, there was times where we're busy, but it's not impossible, right? And there's always a solution. There's always an ask. Like, what's the worst thing? You ask a client if you can push a presentation a day. Like, you know what I mean? Like things are not like life or death in most situations. And so, and being able to realize that and work and lead into kind of like your resources that you have is okay. And that does work.
Yeah, I totally second that. I feel like people a lot of the time are afraid to say something, but don't be. I mean, communication, clear, transparent communication is so important, because also your team is going to want to support you. And without knowing that you're overloaded, they're not going to know. They can't read your mind. They don't know everything that you're doing because they're too focused on what they're doing. So like, you got to actually bring it up. And you made me actually think of whenever I was in, college, I was really stressed out about the idea of like, oh my gosh, I know that designers work on like 6 projects at a time. How could I ever do that? And like, it's funny because it's true, you adapt. But one thing that I have actually figured out, and this is just a personal thing over time, is I leverage my calendar like a work planning tool. And so what I do is like, yeah, I have a bunch of meetings all over the place, but I also block out like, okay, if I have this deadline on Wednesday and I have another one on Thursday, I'm going to work on this thing during 10 to 12 on Monday, get it reviewed here, and then I can shift to this other thing while this person's providing edits. So it's like visually setting those little goals for yourself and breaking down your time. You will be able to do it. And also remember, you can only do one thing at a time, right? So like, you will do all the projects, you will deliver. It's just figuring out what your method is and definitely raising your hand if you need help.
That clears up a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilbert.
Yes. Thank you. Justin Hunter is next.
Yes, hi. I was just, listening in, and I didn't even plan on this happening, but your guys' response to Gilbert was almost like a perfect transition to my question about communicating and adapting. So my question is, what happens when a client miscommunicates what they want from you and throw you a last minute change or request? How you guys go about handling that?
It happens. Well, thankfully there are meeting notes, and so that's good, right? Like we're gonna get to the nitty gritty. Like we do like document all of the things. Like our meetings aren't just like here's creative stuff and that's kind of it. We document changes, and so we're able to understand like where that is, and everyone also is. We share them out in the sense of being like, did we miss anything? Is there anything that we should capture? Are we saying it in the right way to try to help mitigate any of the miscommunication that can potentially happen as we are humans? But a lot of the times, we just we roll with it. You got to roll with it in a lot of occasions, and you respond. And again, it goes back to being nimble, right? You respond as you can with where you are at in the process, and acknowledging where you are in the process, and making the changes that help to serve it, because at the end of the day, they are a client. So we do want to make sure that they walk away with it being happy with what they get, even if it was a miscommunication on their part, right? So it is a lot of just like, okay, cool, we got it, we'll get you, we're here for you.
Totally. And yeah, it happens. I mean, and it's super annoying when it happens, but like we gotta be, that good partner and everything that Arielle said, really, because and sometimes it is a balance between like coming back and clarifying things and like also decision making within the team. And like Arielle said before, if it's this huge change and it's in like quote unquote internal meeting with just the client you're working with, and it's not them having to share stuff with their bosses, like if you can come back and say like, okay, like with these additional changes, like can we shift our meeting to the next day? Like sometimes that can happen, but then sometimes I'll get like requests where it's like the CEO is asking me for this tomorrow, and so and so then we do have to like rally and help, because our job is to partner with the client to make their lives better and to make their people's lives better. And so it's a give and take. Sometimes you do just gotta, you do just have to do it. And other times you can kind of, push back a little and figure out what works best for both parties.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Oh, my bad.
No, I was just going to say, we have project managers that they do a really good job of just managing the expectation and managing, the deliverables and what targets that we need to hit as designers. And they do a good job of organizing us and making sure that the client knows what to expect. And, things change all the time. It's not unusual. And you just have to know how to deal with that, really. Yeah.
Well, all right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Derek Ramos had the next question.
Hello. So my question is, how do your relationships with your clients develop over time as you work with them? You encounter challenges, and how do they develop?
Just through time and through experience. And Gensler's been around for a while, so they have clients that they've been working with since, I think one of the trivia questions is like, when is the Gensler's first client? It's like, I can't remember. I think it was like Bank of America in 1970s or something like that, right? Like just through time, you're going to develop a good relationship, a good and bad relationship. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't work out. We like to think that usually it's a good relationship. And that's just through trust and through experience. And, you just have to build that through, it's really just people working with people. I mean, they're people as well as just, I'm a person. So, we treat each other with respect and stuff. And sometimes it's two clients that just don't get along, and sometimes it's good. So that's really what it is.
Yeah, I would say from another perspective, like there's certain clients that, it's a huge account and, people have known them forever. And like the work that you do just leads to more work because you have a good relationship with the client. And then there's other times too, where it's like you build that trusted relationship with one person in the company and then somebody else in the company sees the work that you did. And then and then they are like, hey, actually, can you help me with this thing? And so like, it's like a network in that way where it's like, if you produce really good work and also if you're just like nice to work with, like if you're not a jerk, like people are going to want to work with you. And so that happens a lot. And then I would say another thing too is like, like there's somebody generally that is like the primary client relationship holder, but there's also like personally I think it's super important to bring the whole team to a meeting, like if and so that younger staff can engage with clients and also start to build their own relationships with them as well, because then also if the client is bringing like younger people to the meeting too, you guys can relate. And then whenever you're, older and have been in the field longer, like that's going to be your client relationship. And so like finding any way to engage, even if you're just hanging out and taking notes, like being there and like connecting and saying hi, like that is good. And then I think another way too is like just getting out there in like the external world with your passions and like communicating about the things that you love and attending conferences and, talks. That's also a place where you get to make relationships that could potentially bloom into a client relationship that happens over time. And so just like Chasen said, it really is just people working with people, and people like want to just work with people that they like and it's enjoyable and both parties benefit. It's like basic kind of human to human interaction. And remembering that, making sure that things aren't so transactional, but rather like a relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Dimitri Brown. Had the next question.
Hello. So my question was, what advice did you guys receive when you first started working at Gensler that has led to your success today?
Well, I'll go first. For me, it was like to stay curious. And it was my project manager at the time who ended up being like my studio director, who's now the office leader, one of the office leaders. And she saw that I was always the one that to be like, why do we do it like that? Or like, do you think we could present this a different way? And, rather than be kind of annoyed at it, because of course, eventually once like, you're like, well, we always do it this way, like let it go and just do the thing. She was like, that's really good. And keeping that sort of like thirst for curiosity alive was something that she saw would be helpful for me. And that's also helped me all the time, because not only is the curiosity in, what we do, but it's curiosity in like how we do it, and also in what can potentially be the future of our work and how we deliver work for our clients and things like that. And so to me, it's always been that just to say like to stay hungry and being like, okay, like what else can I uncover in this thing that might just seem like a daily task where it's like, okay, we're doing another floor plan for another client, another project, another client. There's always something else that we can improve on. There's always something that's new, and like leaning into that new is something that I personally have always kind of done, and it's helped me kind of differentiate and go forward.
Yeah, I think it's and working with people. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of really great design directors, and they obviously know more than me, and just keeping that in mind that these people know what they're doing. They've been working at Gensler or other places for a while, and you're going to learn a lot, and you're always learning, and you're just going to keep learning, and something you get to a point where you're going to be the one that's teaching other people, and it's just learning every day. And with new technologies and new products that come out, things that you would just never think about. I mean, we had a lunch and learn the other day about elevators, that the stacked elevators that, you know, not only just go up and down, they start moving left and right. I mean, technology is just going to keep getting advanced, and, you know, people start putting these VR glasses and stuff, and you're just learning about new things every day.
Yeah, I would definitely say similar things. Ask questions. Like, I remember being told, like, don't be afraid. Like, we want to hear your questions. If you're not asking questions, I'm worried, because there's no way that you know everything already. And so asking questions, asking, you know, why those people that know way more than you are thinking the way that they do and how they come to those conclusions. And also, yeah, just not being afraid to contribute, like not being afraid to throw things out there, because like you're gonna fail, you're gonna make mistakes, and also everybody makes mistakes and everybody knows that. And so limiting yourself and not speaking up and not giving it a shot, that's not the way to go. It's gonna be uncomfortable when you put yourself out there and make mistakes, but that is like key for growing. And you know, everybody at Gensler, I think, really supports that. So yeah.
Thank you. I know Yufeng had asked another question a few minutes ago. So if you want to ask it again.
Yeah, this is like specifically about like designing process. Like, what like softwares do you use?
Go on, Chasen.
I'll do this. So I use Rhino. Well, one, I use pen and paper, and then I get that into a Rhino model. So I use Rhino 3D, and then Adobe Suite. So Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. We use that to develop, you know, renderings and visualization and things like that, and just making graphics, making diagrams. And then Enscape is the new rendering tool. It's kind of new, not that new. Lumion is another rendering tool that people use. 3ds Max is the older, more advanced rendering tool that people use. And I think there's I don't know, people use SketchUp. I personally don't like SketchUp. That's just me. There are some people that use it, but Revit is kind of becoming the main architecture tool. But again, right? So when I started, everything was in AutoCAD, and then I'm sure before I started, everything was in Vectorworks or something else. And you know, by the time you are in the field of architecture and you're 25 or something, there might be another program. So it's really hard to tell what the future of the programs are. They all kind of do the same thing of just putting a building together. It's just different ways of showing that information, really. So yeah, those are the programs that we use.
Is it like hard to since you're like working on Rhino, is it really hard to like transfer files over to the rendering tool?
And that's a whole entire thing about transferring models. You know, some Autodesk programs are obviously compatible with one another, and Rhino has become a lot better. I mean, I can nerd out all day about this stuff, but like, you know, I've always joked about architecture. There needs to be like one program that just does everything. So I mean, that is one of the things about architecture. It's just sometimes you just have a ton of programs open and you're just cycling through one another. Some people hate it. I personally just love it and know how to use it to my advantage. That's just how it is right now. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it appears no one else has a question, so I'll ask one. So, I'm quite sure all three of you guys can answer this, but I know specifically for Liz, I remember you said you majored in architecture. So my first question would be, you know, what was it like? Because I always hear people say it's very difficult, very rigorous, and that because of that, a lot of people change their major. So if you don't mind, can you answer what is it like majoring in architecture, and what specifically made you want to change? Like, I know you said you didn't like you didn't like it because you realize what architects do on a day-to-day basis. But if you can specifically say exactly what it is, just so that way I can keep an eye out for when I go to school.
Yeah, totally. Again, huge caveat. This is just me, this is just how my brain functions. Yeah, it was rigorous, but it's I wouldn't say it's any more rigorous than like any of the other studio based majors. Like the industrial design kids were there just as late, and the interior designers, we pulled all-nighters all the time. So like regardless of what major you go into that's kind of studio and design based, it's super rigorous. I mean, that's just, yeah. But personally, construction documents, when I figured out that I had to, that the concept phase was kind of, shorter in comparison to like translating the design in a way that could be built, detailing drawings, doing hundreds of pages of construction documents, that's when I knew that that's not what I wanted to do, because the parts of design that I loved was like user research, strategic, planning and thinking for how to achieve goals, and the more kind of making it real part through, working with construction and all of that wasn't something that spoke to me. And yeah, so that's why I changed.
Don't listen to her.
I know, I was like Chasen, but Chasen loves it. It's great.
I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing your building get done and seeing it in real. But I will say, I mean, we went to architecture school. It was a lot of work, but I have a bunch of friends that they're not architects. I mean, one person, he's at Netflix now and he's a UX designer. It's a skill set and it's a way of thinking, and you're just learning it that way. And then whether or not for me, I just kind of knew that this is what I wanted, and I wanted to design buildings. I mean, some people leave architecture school and they look back and they say, I'm glad I got that foundation, but I'm going to turn it into something else. You never know what you're going to learn and how you're going to use it. So, yeah.
Totally. Explore. Because there's people too that didn't even start in architecture and ended up in it eventually too. So you could kind of obviously go the spectrum.
Exactly. And that's why, again, it's so important to just like be true to yourself and what your interests are, because the other thing too is that if you stay in a program and you're just suffering the whole time and you're doing it just because you think that that's what you wanted, like that's not great either. And so that goes both ways. Like you just gotta figure out what your interests are and then go for it. And then it creates this beautiful constellation of stars where we're all good at different things and work together to create an end product, because we really can't do it without each other. So, yeah.
Thank you. I also have another question. So, Gensler is one of the most well-known, it's like one of the best firms in New York. So I wanted to ask the three of you, do you guys ever feel that there's like any added pressure because of that? Because you guys are working at a firm such as Gensler?
For me, I think it's more about, I want to make sure that I'm doing my best job. Gensler is well-known. It's definitely one of the more well-known design firms. I mean, it's not the only design firm. And I think for myself, becoming an architect and a designer, it's more just, I want to show that I can do it. It's more about, making sure that I don't let down my team and the people that I work with. But there might be a little added pressure, just that it's Gensler, but I guess I don't really look at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually never thought of that before. I feel like being with Gensler, it's like, it's an opportunity because of like Gensler being so big with so many different people, with so many different projects, that like it's never just on you. And so even if you aren't doing your best work, if you're really struggling and whatnot, like you're going to have a team, or you're going to be able to like, I am somebody in London that has done something similar. And so like the strength of Gensler is like the breadth of knowledge that we have. And so, yeah, it's definitely kind of more of an opportunity rather than pressure. Because I personally, if I was at a smaller firm, I think that I would feel more pressure because it's like every decision that I make is gonna, really be important. But with Gensler, you have that team and you have people looking out for each other. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was actually very informative because I've been wondering that for a while. So thank you for answering that. I don't see any more questions, so I think we're done with the questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for having us. This was awesome.
Oh, regions.
I would say one thing, like, I know that it's difficult in COVID times right now, but if you have to do something like, that is local, like, just go out and talk to people, like, figure out some questions that are like, okay, what would you really value as an addition in your community? What types of things would really like take away from this community that you built? And like, just, I've gone out on the street with other people and do like that intercepts, their user intercept interviews. And so you'll get information that you wouldn't have been able to think of because you're not those users that would be using it. And I think you can do this in other ways too, like probably like posting on local like Facebook groups or, whatever it is, but just trying to find those users and ask them questions that can help inform your design and inspire you. I think that that's, a really important piece.
Yeah, and research, like both those, I was going to say research and Liz said the exact same thing without even knowing. Like, yeah, I think that delving deep into what the problem is, like what is the context, because I think that ends up being more fruitful when a design is like leaning from a really informed place. So +1 to Liz and then maybe adding that. Thank you all for having
us.
Thanks
for having us and great questions. It's awesome talking to you all.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
It's fine. It's all good. Yeah.
Thanks. You too. Bye. Bye, everybody.